today, and I want to not take up time. We decided to call this seminar today, it was my idea to call it Ray Charles, the Music, the Genius, and the Pathology. Some people were really concerned about that and felt that what we would use this forum for would not be wholesome and healthy. And there's a tendency for people to want to hide and to camouflage portions of people's lives, which then makes us a kind of cartoon character, where we don't have the bones and the meat and the vulnerabilities that we all face, and you all as young artists in the room will face during your careers. And so it became critical for me to do a program and use Ray Charles. We've got to use our iconic figures. We've got to use our iconic figures as platforms to empower the next generation of artists. The term art or museum doesn't exist in the traditional African world. There's no such thing as you'd have a building and you would put pictures on the wall behind glass and then lock the door. And in the same way, you wouldn't just have these structures of these iconic figures that we can't touch and feel. We have to use Ray Charles, even though he is no longer with us in the flesh, but his spirit remains. And so in using Ray Charles gives us a vehicle to talk about genius, which many of you have, great creativity, which many of you have, and some of you will be vulnerable to abuses, drug abuse, alcoholism, sexual abuse, weight issues. We all have something that we're struggling with. And so we want to put that in its proper context so we can begin to empower ourselves and be the best musicians we can be. So we have 6 incredible people who all came here because I asked them to, which really humbles my heart and makes me feel so good that they all came here. And you all here at Berkeley need to understand that there's a whole big community out there with some incredible people who can offer you great insight and direction in your career, and they're all available to help. So I'm going to escort our first, Lloyd, you can help me. We're going to escort, we have to pay homage to our elders, and so we're going to escort the most youthful member of our panel to take her seat here on the stage, and we're going to have her to introduce herself to us and tell us she can come and sit right here. You can help her with that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You get right there. Thank you, that's great. You can tell us your full name. I'm not going to do this in the traditional way because nothing about us is traditional. You can take a seat.
All right. My name is Venus Irving-Prescott, and I was born in the roaring 20s in Motown on 8 Mile Road.
Wow. Our next presenter, I'll have him to introduce himself.
My name is Lloyd Sheldon. My name is Lloyd Sheldon Johnson.
Dr. Lloyd Sheldon Johnson.
And I am also was also born in Detroit, but not in the 20s.
Okay, next.
My name is Eric Jackson. I'm a radio announcer here in Boston. I've been on the air here in Boston since 1969. I've been at the current station where I am now since 1977. And I guess that's enough.
And he has kept jazz and other forms of music that emanates from the blues alive. He has made the careers of many artists. He is loved around the world for the great job he's done in keeping your music preserved and giving it the dignity when many stations had allowed it to go awry. Yes.
Good morning. I'm called Zakiya Alake, and in my work life, I help people who do battle with the disease of addiction on a daily basis. I'm also a performance artist. can't sing a lick.
Thank you. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Ronald White, and I have worked in many areas. One is ministry and the other is medicine, and I've done a lot of work with addiction. And I started a day treatment program for addiction in a public housing project, the Bromley Heath Public Housing Project, Project New Life. And I'll talk about addiction, brain, vulnerability, and genius.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Leah Randolph. I'm here in a couple of capacities. I was one of those former dancers that actually danced in The Wiz on Broadway and did the Wiz movie, and have a little bit of history around blacks in the theater and the arts. And I also have an agency called Commonwealth Mental Health and Wellness Center, where we address addiction and mental health and wellness.
Thank you. Be careful. So you see, we've got quite a diverse panel here, and we're not going to be talking heads. They're going to start with a kind of interactive conversation with one another, because we all are part of a continuum. We're placed at an advantage or a disadvantage by who we are, who we come from, who our parents are. But in some way or another, all of us are connected. And even those of you here in the room this afternoon, after today, you are part of that family. You are connected too, because now we've had this kind of encounter with one another. So when we talk about Ray Charles, I'm going to turn over to him to talk for a moment. I want to say that it's significant that Ray Charles was born in 1930. As a musician and an artist, to understand Ray Charles, you have to understand what historically was going on in the world and in America in the 1930s. And what happened the first 15 years of his life, and what happened in his mother's life in terms of the way she reared him. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But first, I want my panelists to kind of give me, when I say Ray Charles, what comes to mind, and what is your relationship with one another? Because we realized something today. Many of us had not met, but we had met. And when we are looking at the life of Ray Charles, that statement I just made is significant, because it's about something known as ancestral memory. Many of you may have never heard that term before. I fundamentally believe that it's real and it exists. I fundamentally believe that that we are connected. There are no accidents. And so we're going to have the panel to kind of unpack that in terms of how we are all connected. So why don't we start with Venus Prescott.
Okay. I lived in New York for 10 years in the cabaret scene. I worked in the Savannah Club for 5 years. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I was raised. And the first thing I think about when I think about Ray Charles is that as a dancer during the prime of my life, Nat Cole and Ray Charles were as much a part of my preparation to go to work at night as soap and water. I had to hear either Ray Charles or Nat Cole, otherwise something was wrong with the preparation for me to get out of the house. So that was my preparation.
That's a very interesting point, Venus. Thank you. And many look at Ray Charles as they did many of these artists when people could not afford or have access to psychiatrists or medical doctors, that Ray Charles and many of our artists, with the music being functional, played that role in our lives. It became more than just ornamental art, it became functional. Lloyd, Dr. Sheldon Johnson.
I'm an educator and a spiritualist and also a creative artist. And my first memories of Ray Charles took place, of course, in Detroit and through my parents and my grandparents. And as I was sharing with the group a little earlier, I remember what I say and my parents moaning these Ray Charles tunes, and my grandparents being very, very attached to his country western album, because coming from the South, they were really attached to country western music and also gospel. So Ray Charles, for everyone, satisfied something for them musically. I mean, he could sing a song about the pain and agonies of a relationship. He could gospelize something and have you screaming. He could have you shaking your booty at 7 o'clock in the morning because he was that kind of an entertainer. You know?
And a very interesting point about that, for all of you young students here studying here at Berkeley, it is important to understand that historical timeline. Because when we look at soul music and blues music, we recognize that when slavery ended and there was the Great Migration from the South to the North, there also was the formation of a class of literate slaves who now could read and write, because it was illegal. It was illegal to teach a slave to read and write. And so it was important for people to separate themselves and be able to say, so for some people, I can read. And this is when the oral tradition was challenged by people who now had hymnal books that they had not necessarily written, but somebody else had put together, because the music couldn't be legitimate if it wasn't written down. And that's one of the diseases we suffer from. And one of the diseases that we hope that you won't catch while you're here at Berkeley is that the written word is not more important than the spoken word. That to be a full musician, we need to have both. And so what Dr. Johnson just said is quite true. Ray Charles, as a visionary and a revolutionary, put the drum back into the music and began to develop what we know as a respect for an African-centered aesthetic. So many people were so concerned with being palatable to the majority community that in many instances they had compromised the music. And so when the Fifth Jubilee singers traveled to Europe to sing for Queen Victoria, she brought them over there to do the Negro spirituals. But they felt the need, in order for the Negro spirituals to have legitimacy, to first sing the European repertoire. And Queen Victoria, I'm clearly paraphrasing, said, look, we know about that. We got that down. We just want you to sing them Negro spirituals because y'all got that down. So it's important for all of you here, particularly those of you who may not be Americans, to not relinquish and feel you have to give up what you already came here with, but to keep your encyclopedia of knowledge and abilities open. Eric.
My name is Eric Jackson. First of all, I'm the son of the first African-American radio announcer in New England. My father went on the air in 1947. He went to audition at the station for their house band as a vocalist. And they didn't hire him as the vocalist, but they hired him as a radio announcer. So I grew up actually listening to Duke Ellington. And literally, I heard my father say on a number of occasions, if you started talking about Count Basie in my house, my father would tell you in a minute, you were cursing. That's a curse word. This is a Duke Ellington house. But I mean, there was always music around me growing up. Generally, it was music from the African-American tradition. Although we went to a church, for the most part, that was in a state of transition. It had been an all-white church shortly before we got there, and it was in a state of transition. And that probably is why when I first heard Ray Charles, I was kind of shocked, and I didn't really like it that much. I remember telling, I had a brother of mine who was 4 years older than I am, and I remember telling him, no, that man, Ray Charles, he screams too much. But I remember my brother's reply, I never forgot it. He said to me, because this was a popular phrase at the time, he said to me, well, man, you got a hole in your soul. So